Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her formal diplomatic robes one last time before stepping into the massive crystalline chamber that housed the Galactic Council. The structure itself was a marvel of alien engineering, carved from a single piece of translucent blue stone that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the tiered seating arrangements, their various forms creating a tapestry of colors, shapes, and sizes that would have been overwhelming to most humans. But Sarah had spent the last 15 years preparing for this moment. She walked with measured steps across the polished floor, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the surface. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Hundreds of thousands of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs tracked her movement as she approached the central speaking platform. Some beings communicated through bioluminescent patterns that flickered across their skin, while others released pheromone clouds that her universal translator couldn't interpret but somehow conveyed their emotions anyway. The Zenthari delegation sat in the prime viewing area, their insectoid forms gleaming under the chamber's ethereal lighting. Their leader, High Arbiter Zex Thul, watched her with compound eyes that reflected the room's light, like fractured diamonds. Beside them, the aquatic Narians floated in their environmental suits, tentacles swaying with what Sarah had learned to recognize as either curiosity or contempt. The massive Krogan delegates dominated an entire section with their boulder-like forms, while the ethereal Vorthak seemed to phase in and out of visible reality as they observed. Sarah reached the platform and turned to face the assembled council. She had rehearsed this speech countless times, working with linguists and cultural experts to ensure every word would translate correctly across the various species' communication methods. Her heart rate remained steady, her breathing controlled. This was humanity's first formal introduction to the galactic community, and she carried the hopes of 8 billion humans on her shoulders. Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice carried by the chamber's acoustic systems to every corner of the vast space. I stand before you as Ambassador Sarah Chen, speaking for the species known as humanity, inhabitants of the world we call Earth in the Sol system. A ripple of movement went through the crowd. Some species had already encountered human explorers or traders, but this was the first time humanity had sought formal recognition and membership in the galactic community. Sarah could see the reactions varying wildly between species. Some showed what appeared to be interest, others displayed obvious skepticism, and a few seemed openly hostile. We come before you not as conquerors or supplicants, but as neighbors seeking understanding and cooperation. Sarah continued. Humanity has much to offer the galactic community. Our scientists have developed unique approaches to energy generation and space propulsion. Our artists have created works that have already begun to find appreciation among several member species. Our philosophers and ethicists have wrestled with questions of morality and justice that we believe could contribute to galactic discourse. High Arbiter Zex Thul's mandibles clicked in a pattern that Sarah's cultural briefings had taught her indicated mild amusement mixed with disdain. The Zenthari had been one of the founding members of the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago, and they viewed newer species with barely concealed superiority. But most importantly, Sarah said, raising her voice slightly, humanity brings a perspective shaped by our unique evolutionary history. We are a species that has known war, yes, but we have also learned to value peace. We have experienced division, but we have also discovered the strength that comes from unity in diversity. We have made mistakes, grievous ones, but we have also shown the capacity to learn, to grow, and to become better than we were. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The chamber remained eerily quiet, with only the soft hum of environmental systems and the occasional whisper of translated conversations breaking the silence. We do not seek to change your ways or impose our values upon you, Sarah continued. Instead, we ask only for the opportunity to contribute to the greater good of all galactic civilization. We request formal recognition as a member species of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that such membership entails. Sarah stepped back from the speaking podium and waited. The formal protocol required a period of deliberation before any responses could be given. She watched as various delegation leaders began consulting with their advisors in hushed tones, or through methods of communication she couldn't perceive. The Vorthak delegation suddenly materialized more solidly, their leader stepping forward with movements that seemed to bend reality around him. When he spoke, his words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The humans speak of peace and cooperation," the Vorthok representative said, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "Yet our scouts have observed their military capabilities. They possess weapons that could devastate entire worlds. They have a history written in the blood of their own species. How can they claim to seek peace when they carry such capacity for destruction?" Sarah had expected this challenge. Humanity's military history was well documented, and their current defensive capabilities were impossible to hide from advanced galactic civilizations. "Honored Vorthak representative," she replied, "we do not deny our history or our capabilities. The capacity for violence exists within us, as it does within many species. But wisdom lies not in the absence of strength, but in the choice of how to use it. Humanity has learned that true strength comes from restraint, from choosing cooperation over conquest, understanding over destruction." The massive Krogan delegate's voice rumbled like an avalanche when he spoke. "Pretty words, small human, but words are wind." Sarah smiled slightly. "The proof lies in our presence here today. We could have attempted to take what we wanted by force. Our fleets could have struck at isolated worlds or trade routes. Instead, we chose diplomacy. We chose to stand here, unarmed and alone, before the assembled might of the galaxy, and ask for acceptance rather than demand submission." High Arbiter Zex Thul's compound eyes glittered as he leaned forward. "An interesting perspective, human ambassador. But perhaps your restraint comes not from virtue, but from recognition of your own limitations. Perhaps you seek council membership not as equals, but as children seeking protection from forces beyond your comprehension." The words stung, but Sarah maintained her composure. "With respect, High Arbiter, humanity has faced extinction-level threats before, and survived them through our own efforts. We seek membership not from weakness, but from a genuine desire to contribute to something larger than ourselves. We have learned that isolation breeds ignorance, and ignorance breeds conflict. We choose engagement over isolation, understanding over assumption." As the debate continued, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere of the chamber. Some delegates, who had initially seemed neutral, were beginning to show signs of irritation or hostility. Private conversations were becoming more animated, and several species were displaying what her cultural training identified as aggressive postures. The Nerian delegate's tentacles writhed as he spoke through his environmental suit's communication system. "The humans speak of their desire for peace, but they fail to understand the delicate balances that maintain galactic stability. They are newcomers, untested, and unknown. How can we trust them with access to our trade routes, our technologies, our worlds?" Sarah sensed the mood of the chamber shifting against her. What had begun as skeptical but fair questioning was evolving into something more hostile. She realized that this might not simply be about humanity's qualifications for membership. There were currents of galactic politics at play that she was only beginning to understand. "I understand your concerns," she said, addressing the Nerian delegate directly. "Trust must be earned, not simply granted. We do not ask for immediate full access to all council privileges. We propose a provisional membership, a trial period during which humanity can demonstrate its value and commitment to galactic peace." High Arbiter Zex Thul's mandibles clicked again, this time in what Sarah recognized as a pattern of dismissal. "The human speaks of commitment, but actions speak louder than words. Perhaps it is time for humanity to prove its peaceful intentions through deed rather than speech." Something in his tone sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She had spent years studying galactic politics and diplomacy, and she recognized the subtle shift that indicated the conversation was moving beyond formal debate into something more dangerous. "What exactly are you proposing, High Arbiter?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Zex Thul stood, his tall insectoid form dominating the central area of the chamber. "A test, Ambassador Chen. A demonstration of humanity's true nature when faced with genuine threat. Only through adversity can character be truly measured." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, as delegates from various species began voicing their opinions. Some seemed supportive of whatever the High Arbiter was suggesting, while others appeared concerned or confused. Sarah stood at the center of it all, suddenly feeling very alone and very vulnerable. She had come here seeking peaceful admission to the galactic community. Instead, she found herself facing something that felt increasingly like a trap. But she was Sarah Chen, humanity's chosen representative, and she would not show fear in the face of alien intimidation. "I am prepared to face whatever test you propose." The first indication that something was terribly wrong came not through official channels, but through the emergency communicator hidden in Sarah's diplomatic pouch. The device, designed to look like an ornamental cultural artifact, suddenly began vibrating with the specific pattern that indicated an extreme emergency on Earth. Sarah was in her assigned quarters aboard the Council station, reviewing transcripts from the day's proceedings and preparing her response to whatever test the Galactic Council had in mind. The Chamber's debate had concluded with High Arbiter Zex Thul announcing that the test would be revealed within 24 standard galactic hours, and that humanity's response would determine their fate. She activated the communicator with practiced discretion, holding it close to her ear as the encrypted message played. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the quantum-encrypted transmission, his words barely controlled panic. "Sarah, Earth is under attack. Multiple hostile fleets have emerged from hyperspace and are engaging our orbital defenses. They're using weapons and ship designs we don't recognize, but their formations match intelligence profiles for several Galactic Council member species. The Zenthari, Narians, and at least 3 other species have launched a coordinated assault on our homeworld." Sarah's blood ran cold. She had been negotiating in good faith while the Council had been planning humanity's destruction. The test wasn't going to be some diplomatic challenge or cultural exchange. It was genocide. "Our colonies are reporting similar attacks," Morrison continued. "Mars, Europa, the mining stations in the asteroid belt, they hit everything simultaneously. Sarah, they're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to exterminate us. The attacks are focused on population centers and industrial infrastructure." The transmission cut to static, leaving Sarah alone in the alien quarters with the weight of her species' survival pressing down on her. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Then, something deep inside her, something that had been carefully controlled and hidden for her entire diplomatic career, began to awaken. Sarah Chen had not been chosen as humanity's ambassador solely for her diplomatic skills or her linguistic abilities. She had been chosen because of what she was, what she had always been beneath the careful facade of civilization and courtesy. The selection committee had known that eventually, humanity might face a situation where diplomacy would fail, where peaceful words would not be enough. They had chosen her because Sarah Chen was what humanity became when pushed too far. She stood slowly, her movements taking on a different quality. The careful, measured steps of a diplomat were replaced by something more predatory, more dangerous. She moved to her personal luggage and began removing items that appeared to be clothing and personal effects but were actually something far more lethal. The dress uniform came apart to reveal body armor made from materials that didn't exist in any Galactic Council database. The ceremonial jewelry transformed into weapons that operated on principles the Council's scientists had never encountered. The cultural artifacts became tools of war that would have made the galaxy's most feared warriors weep with envy. But the most dangerous transformation was happening inside Sarah herself. The diplomatic mask she had worn for 15 years was falling away, revealing something that the Galactic Council had made a critical error in underestimating. They had seen humanity's capacity for violence in their historical records, but they had fundamentally misunderstood what that capacity meant. Sarah activated her personal communication array, bypassing the station's monitoring systems with encryption codes that existed in no Council database. The response came immediately from Admiral Morrison. "Sarah, thank God you're still alive. We thought they might have taken you hostage or worse." "Admiral," Sarah's voice had changed, taking on a tone that Morrison had heard only once before, during her final qualification trials. "I need a full tactical assessment. What are our defensive capabilities? And what's the status of the Cerberus Protocol?" There was a pause. The Cerberus Protocol was humanity's most classified contingency plan, known only to a handful of the highest-ranking military and political leaders. It was the plan they had hoped never to use. "Sarah, are you sure? Once we activate Cerberus, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way." "Admiral, they've already made their choice. They struck first, targeting civilians and population centers. They've shown us what they think of human life." Sarah's voice carried a cold fury that would have made her diplomatic colleagues flee in terror. "Activate Cerberus. All protocols. Full authorization." "Understood, Ambassador." "Cerberus is active. How long do you need?" Sarah looked around the luxurious quarters that had been provided for her. Quarters that were now feeling more like a prison cell. "Give me 6 hours. Then you can show them what humanity really is when you take the gloves off." The next few hours passed in a carefully choreographed dance of deception. Sarah maintained her appearance of concerned but helpless diplomacy, attending emergency sessions where council members expressed their shock and dismay at the unauthorized attacks on human space. High Arbiter Zex Thul's performance was particularly masterful, as he called for an immediate investigation into these rogue elements that had apparently acted without council approval. But Sarah could see through their lies. She watched the subtle signals passing between delegations, the carefully coordinated responses, the way certain species representatives weren't even bothering to hide their satisfaction. This wasn't the work of rogue elements. This was a planned extermination, approved at the highest levels of the Galactic Council. During a recess, the Vorthak representative approached her with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Ambassador Chen, I want you to know that not all council members approved of this action. Some of us argued for genuine consideration of humanity's application." Sarah looked at him with eyes that had grown cold and calculating. "I appreciate your concern, Representative, but I'm afraid the time for consideration has passed. Actions have consequences." Something in her tone made the ethereal being take a step back. For a species that could phase between dimensions, the Vorthak had excellent instincts for danger, and every instinct the representative possessed was suddenly screaming warnings about the humans standing before him. As the 6-hour mark approached, Sarah excused herself from the proceedings, claiming she needed to contact Earth for updated casualty reports. The council members nodded sympathetically, several expressing their hopes that the situation could be resolved quickly and peacefully. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Sarah returned to her quarters and activated a device that looked like a simple meditation crystal. In reality, it was a quantum communicator linked directly to the most classified military installations in human space. Admiral Morrison's face appeared in a holographic projection that would be invisible to any monitoring systems the Council might have in place. "Admiral, status report." "Sarah, it's bad. They hit us hard, and they hit us fast. Earth's orbital defenses held longer than expected, but we've lost significant infrastructure. Casualties are in the millions." But Morrison's expression shifted to something that was equal parts anticipation and fear. "Cerberus is ready. All systems are active, and we're in position." Sarah nodded. "Then it's time to remind the galaxy why humanity doesn't start wars. Admiral, we finish them." She turned off the communicator and walked to the quarter's main window, which looked out over the council station's sprawling structure. Thousands of ships from hundreds of different species were docked at the massive facility, representing the accumulated might of galactic civilization. In a few minutes, they would all learn what it meant to threaten humanity's existence. Sarah activated one final device, this one disguised as a simple hair ornament. It was actually a beacon that would serve as a targeting reference for what was about to happen. She placed it carefully on the window ledge and stepped back. Somewhere in the depths of space, human vessels that had been hidden for decades began moving toward their targets. These weren't the exploration ships or trade vessels that the galaxy had become familiar with. These were weapons of war designed by a species that had learned to survive by being more dangerous than anything that wanted to destroy them. The Cerberus Protocol wasn't just a military strategy. It was a complete transformation of humanity from a peaceful, exploring species into something that nightmares were made of. It was what humans became when they stopped pretending to be civilized and remembered what they really were underneath all the diplomacy and culture. Sarah checked her personal chronometer. In 3 minutes, the galaxy would discover that they had made a terrible mistake. They had seen humanity's capacity for peace and mistaken it for weakness. They had seen human diplomacy and assumed it meant humans were soft. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to choose peace. And when that choice was taken away from them, what remained was something that had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain and never forgotten how to kill. The first explosions lit up the space around the council station exactly on schedule. Sarah watched through the window as human ships materialized out of nowhere. Their stealth technology finally revealed as they opened fire on the assembled galactic fleet. But these attacks weren't the emergency alarms throughout the council station created a symphony of terror that Sarah found oddly soothing. Different species had different warning systems, and the cacophony of sounds, lights, and pheromone releases painted the station in a canvas of panic that felt appropriate for what was unfolding. She walked calmly through corridors filled with fleeing aliens, her diplomatic robes having been replaced by the black combat suit that had been hidden beneath her ceremonial clothing. The transformation was complete now. Ambassador Sarah Chen, humanity's peaceful representative, had died the moment the first human civilian had been vaporized by Galactic Council weapons. What walked through the station now was something far more dangerous. The council chamber was in chaos when she arrived. Representatives from dozens of species were screaming at each other in languages that her universal translator had given up trying to process simultaneously. Some were demanding immediate evacuation, others were calling for military reinforcement, and a few were simply cowering in their seats as reports of the human counterattack continued to pour in. High Arbiter Zex Thule stood at the center of the maelstrom, his compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting as he tried to maintain some semblance of order. When he saw Sarah enter the chamber, his mandibles clicked in. What she had learned was either surprise or fear. Perhaps both. "Ambassador Chen," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise. "Thank the cosmic spirits you are safe. We must evacuate you immediately. It appears that your species has responded to the attacks with unexpected aggression." Sarah walked down the central aisle, her footsteps echoing in moments of relative quiet between the various alien exclamations. Every eye in the chamber fixed on her, and gradually the noise began to die down as delegates realized that something fundamental had changed about the human representative. "Unexpected aggression," she repeated, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Is that what you call it when prey fights back? High Arbiter?" Zex Thule's mandibles twitched. "I do not understand your meaning, Ambassador. The attacks on your worlds were conducted by rogue elements, acting without council authorization. We are as shocked as you are by these tragic events." Sarah laughed, and the sound made several nearby aliens instinctively back away. It wasn't the polite, diplomatic laughter they had heard from her before. It was something predatory and cold. "Rogue elements," she said, reaching the central platform. "Is that what we're calling it? Tell me, High Arbiter, do your rogue elements normally coordinate their attacks with such precision? Do they normally have access to classified intelligence about human defensive positions? Do they normally know the exact locations of civilian population centers that aren't marked on any public star charts?" The chamber fell completely silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to quiet, as if the station itself was holding its breath. "Ambassador," the Nerian representative's tentacles writhed nervously as he spoke, "you cannot seriously be suggesting that the Council authorized these attacks. We are a peaceful organization dedicated to galactic stability and cooperation." Sarah turned to face the aquatic alien, and he immediately regretted drawing her attention. Peaceful, she said slowly. You want to talk about peace? Let me tell you what happened to the children on Europa Colony when your rogue elements attacked. They were in their school dome, learning about different alien cultures, when your weapons tore through the protective barriers. The atmosphere vented in seconds. Do you know what it's like to die in vacuum, Representative? Do you know what those children experienced in their final moments? The Narian's tentacles went completely still. Around the chamber, other delegates were beginning to show signs of genuine fear as they realized that the human before them was not the same creature who had addressed them peacefully just days before. Or perhaps, Sarah continued, her voice never rising but somehow becoming more terrible. You'd like to hear about the retirement colony on Kepler Station? Average age of residents was 74 years old. They were playing chess and tending gardens when your ships arrived. Your weapons were so precise that they specifically targeted the medical center first, ensuring that anyone injured in the subsequent attacks would die slowly and in pain. High Arbiter Zexthal attempted to reassert control. Ambassador Chen, we understand you are grief-stricken, but these accusations are completely unfounded. The Council would never authorize such actions. Sarah reached into her combat suit and withdrew a device that made every security system in the chamber start screaming warnings. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense, but the energy readings it gave off were unlike anything in the Council's databases. This, she said, holding up the device, contains the complete communication logs from your command ships during the attacks. Every order, every tactical update, every gloating comment about how easy it was to surprise the primitive humans. Would you like me to play them for the assembled council? The device projected a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Alien voices speaking in various languages filled the air, and the universal translators began working overtime to process the communications. What emerged was a clear picture of a coordinated military operation, planned and executed at the highest levels of the Galactic Council. Target Package 7, the residential districts. Ensure no evacuation routes remain operational. Confirmed, High Arbiter. Weapons are configured for maximum civilian casualties. The humans' defensive positions are exactly where our intelligence indicated. This is almost too easy. The recordings continued, each revelation making the assembled delegates more uncomfortable. But what was most terrifying wasn't the content of the communications. It was the way Sarah stood perfectly still and calm as the evidence of genocide played around her. When the recordings finished, the chamber was silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. High Arbiter Zexthal's compound eyes flickered as he processed what had just been revealed. The recordings could be fabricated, he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah smiled, and the expression would have been perfectly pleasant on anyone else's face. On hers, it was absolutely terrifying. Could they? She asked. I suppose that's possible. But what about this? Another device emerged from her suit, this one projecting a real-time tactical display of human space. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as the scope of the human counterattack became clear. The attacking fleets hadn't just been defeated, they had been systematically annihilated. Every ship, every crew, every piece of technology that had participated in the assault on humanity was gone. But the human forces hadn't stopped there. They were now advancing toward the home systems of every species that had participated in the attacks. Your Zenthari fleets, Sarah said conversationally, were impressive. 3,000 ships. If our sensors are correct, they lasted approximately 18 minutes against our defensive squadrons. The Nerian force put up a slightly better fight, 22 minutes. But the result was the same. She gestured to the display, where symbols representing human ships were moving inexorably toward alien star systems. But here's what you really need to understand, Sarah continued, her voice taking on a quality that made the bravest warriors in the chamber feel like small children. Those weren't our military fleets. Those were our home defense units. Automated systems, mostly, designed to protect civilian populations. Our actual military hasn't engaged yet. The implications of her words sank in slowly. If automated defense systems had completely destroyed the attacking fleets, what would happen when humanity's actual military forces arrived? This is impossible. The Krogan delegate's voice was barely a whisper. Our intelligence indicated that human military capabilities were centuries behind galactic standard. Sarah's laugh filled the chamber again, and this time several delegates actually fled. Your intelligence, she said, was based on what we wanted you to see. Did you really think a species that had survived everything Earth could throw at us, that had clawed its way from hunter-gatherers to interstellar civilization in mere millennia, would reveal its true capabilities to potential enemies? The tactical display updated, showing new information that made the blood freeze in every alien's veins. Human ships were emerging from previously unknown locations throughout the galaxy. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. Tens of thousands. A hidden fleet that dwarfed the combined military might of the entire Galactic Council. You wanted to test humanity's true nature, Sarah said, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute authority. You wanted to see what we would do when faced with genuine threat. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out. High Arbiter Zex Thul's compound eyes were fixed on the display, watching symbols representing the death of his civilization advancing steadily toward Zenthari space. What do you want? He asked, his voice broken and desperate. Sarah turned to face him directly. And in that moment, every being in the chamber understood that they were not looking at a diplomat anymore. They were looking at death incarnate, at the embodiment of humanity's capacity for absolute, total warfare. What do I want? She repeated. I want you to understand something very simple. Humanity didn't want this war. We came here in peace, seeking cooperation and mutual understanding. You chose to respond to our open hand with violence against our families, our children, our elders. She stepped closer to the High Arbiter, and despite his significant size advantage, he instinctively backed away. So now you get to see what happens when humanity stops trying to be civilized. You get to experience what we become when you threaten everything we hold dear. You wanted to test our true nature? Our true nature is that we are the most dangerous predators this galaxy has ever produced. And we have spent centuries learning to control that nature in the name of peace. The tactical display updated again. Human ships had reached the outer systems of the attacking species' homeworlds, but instead of immediately attacking, they simply waited. But here's the thing about humanity that you never understood, Sarah continued. We're not monsters. We're not genocidal maniacs who kill for the pleasure of it. We're something much more dangerous than that. We're a species that believes in justice. She activated another control, and the display changed to show detailed scans of the alien homeworlds. Civilian populations, industrial centers, military installations. Everything was cataloged and analyzed. Your military forces that attacked our worlds are gone. Your commanders who planned the assault are dead. Your ships that fired on our children are floating debris. But your civilians, your non-combatants, your innocents, who had nothing to do with this atrocity, they remain untouched. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. This wasn't how warfare was supposed to work. When a species demonstrated this level of military superiority, they conquered. They enslaved. They destroyed. They didn't stop at military targets. This is your lesson in humanity's true nature, Sarah said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We are capable of violence beyond your comprehension. We can and will destroy anyone who threatens our existence. But we choose to limit that violence to those who deserve it. End quote. High Arbiter Zex Thul's mandibles clicked frantically. What are your terms? Sarah smiled again. And this time the expression carried genuine warmth. It was somehow more terrifying than her previous cold smiles. Terms? There are no terms. There is only justice. The species that attacked us will face consequences appropriate to their actions. The individuals responsible will be held accountable, but innocent life will be protected, because that's what separates us from you. She turned to address the entire chamber, her voice carrying the authority of someone who spoke for 8 billion humans and the military might to enforce her will. Let this be a lesson to the galaxy. Humanity seeks peace, cooperation, and mutual respect. But if you choose to threaten our existence, if you choose to target our innocent, if you choose to mistake our desire for peace as weakness, you will discover that we are capable of becoming your worst nightmare. The tactical display showed human ships beginning to withdraw from alien space, their point made without firing a single shot at civilian targets. The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved, Sarah announced. A new governing body will be established, one that operates on principles of actual justice and equality, rather than the whims of ancient species who view newcomers as threats to be eliminated. She looked directly at High Arbiter Zex Thul, and her next words carried the weight of absolute certainty. And if anyone attempts to threaten humanity again, they will discover that today was us being merciful. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy had a new apex predator, and it was a species that had learned to temper its lethality with justice. Sarah Chen, ambassador of humanity, turned and walked calmly out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of aliens who would spend the rest of their lives remembering the day they learned what humanity truly was, when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Behind her, the old galactic order crumbled, and something new and more just began to take its place. The galaxy would never forget the lesson of that day. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their ships. It was their restraint, and their willingness to abandon it when justice demanded action, endom, or chaotic. They were surgical, precise, targeted at specific ships that belonged to specific species. The species that had attacked Earth found their vessels systematically destroyed, while ships belonging to neutral or sympathetic species were left completely untouched. The message was clear. This was not random destruction. This was judgment, delivered with the precision of a species that had spent centuries learning how to wage war more effectively than any other civilization in the galaxy. Sarah smiled as she watched High Arbiter Zex Thul's flagship erupting in a ball of superheated plasma. The Zenthari had wanted to test humanity's true nature when faced with genuine threat. They were about to get their answer, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos in the chamber. But I want it clearly understood that humanity enters into this under protest. We came here in good faith, seeking partnership and cooperation. If you choose to meet our peaceful overtures with hostility, the responsibility for what follows lies with you. The chamber fell silent again. But this time, the silence felt different. It was the silence of a predator preparing to strike, of forces being set into motion that could not be easily stopped. Sarah stood straight and tall on the speaking platform, representing not just herself or her government, but the entire human species. She had no idea that within the next few hours, that species would be fighting for its very survival, and that her own nature would prove to be something far more dangerous than anyone in the chamber could possibly imagine.